Welcome to the Intentional Success Podcast, where we unpack the top strategies, explore business trends, and drill down into best practices to help your live events production business grow and scale on purpose. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. In this episode of the Intentional Success Podcast, I've got some big announcements. I'm excited about some stuff. Stay tuned. I can't say it often enough, and I know not everybody appreciates these words when I say them, but the pandemic was the best thing that ever happened to the live events production rental industry. Now, having said that, I know lots of people, lost their jobs, and it was terrifying. It was stressful. Money was lost. It was not a good time. However, we had an opportunity to learn something about ourselves. The pandemic, that shut our industry down, taught us a very important lesson, and is that we had too much overhead. So in 2020, a lot of forward-looking live events companies pivoted their business at the beginning of the pandemic to embrace virtual events, and in the process, they discovered how profitable a low overhead outcome-based selling model could be. Now, many folks just thought this was a temporary solution. They had tons of gear sitting on the shelf. They wanted to hire back their technicians. The things that defined them as companies were on furlough, and they wanted to get back to the way that they used to do business. And as in-person events came back, some folks reverted to their old business models, and they ended up paying the price in low margins and high stress. As the supply chain struggled from the effects of the pandemic, there weren't people to hire back. The cost of trucks and labor, logistics almost doubled. And the asset-based rental production companies struggled to demonstrate value in their outdated pricing models. Now, add on top of that the customers changed, right? All of a sudden, we had a new set of buyers. They were younger. They weren't familiar with our industry. They didn't understand our language. They didn't understand why we were showing them all these line item prices and acting like this equipment was a big deal, because they didn't know what it was, and everybody seemed to have it. So why were we talking about it? Anyway, we know what happened. Some companies made modifications to their business and did extremely well in the ensuing years. So in late 2020, after the dust had started to settle, we knew that the pandemic was going to be a long haul. We knew that we wouldn't see any sense of normalcy until 2023, where we are now. I started to explore whether this phenomenon of higher profit for less work, and the idea that this is less stressful, could we replicate this when in-person events returned, right? And by early 2022, it was pretty darn clear that it would work. I mean, all of a sudden the floodgates opened and lots of business was to be had. My clients, many of you, had to turn down business just to get by, and you ended up making a lot of money, because you didn't have people you could hire back. You couldn't even buy trucks. It was hard enough to even hire a truck to send equipment across the country. You were turning down work. Your overhead was still in check, and you made a ton of money. And if you turned down work, life got easier. Holy wow, what a concept. So by the end of 22, we're starting to see the results of scalable companies. And I felt at that time that I had no choice but to once again pivot my business model and recalibrate my content and make scalability the foundation of my consulting practice. So now that it's been a little over 3 years since we pivoted, I've got some great news. We have learned that scalability is the first franchisable business model that makes sense since the long extinct rental dealer model of the 70s and 80s. And none of you are old enough to remember any of that, right? People who lived through that don't listen to podcasts. In fact, they're mostly retired. What makes scalability franchisable is that it doesn't require that the owner be an expert in event production to oversee their business. Standard business practices apply. Owners don't have to work in the business in order to succeed. They don't have to be an expert at design or show calling or production sales. They just need to know how to run a business. And now they can devote more time to work on their business, which opens up their options for retirement, succession planning, exit strategies, right? And this is not just theory. My clients have been implementing scalable choices for more than 2 years, and the results have been phenomenal, right? So the scalability model makes a lot more money, but what delights me, and the reason I'm so excited today, is how much easier it is to operate a scalable business. Because scalability redefines busy. Actually, it makes busy obsolete. Busy becomes a choice. If you want to be busy, be busy. You don't need to feel busy all the time. Okay? You don't need to chase revenue to make ends meet. All you have to do is commit to lower overhead and turn away unworthy work. Instead of trying to bolster bad months with crummy revenue, you cut back on revenue in busy months. Eliminate some of the windfall business that stresses you out. You keep your overhead in check and everything works out just fine. And much of what we have learned about operating on a scalable level is kind of counterintuitive if you've spent decades focused on revenue and job costs. So you've seen a marked shift in my webinar blog post content in this past year, right? And I recently held a sold out masterclass on intentional scalability with 30 business owners. It was wildly successful. The concepts are so clearly logical and the results are so stunning that I thought I was going to have to perform CPR on a couple of the older guys, right? And I want to tell you more about this and some of the opportunities this creates for you. But first, I need to explain why this is so important to me right now, which is what this podcast is all about, is I've got some announcements to make. So before this spring, I've never really given retirement much consideration. I presumed I would just keep working until I wasn't relevant anymore. People lose interest in me or, whatever. So recently, my wife sat down with our financial planner, as we do every 6 months, and confirmed that we absolutely can afford for me to retire in 5 years, which means I plan on making a victory lap starting in 4 years, because scalability is the thing that's going to let me retire. It's actually going to help many of you retire as well. So announcement number one is that I'm counting down the years, months, and days towards a full retirement. There are things I want to do that have nothing to do with AV or consulting, which is what retirement should be. And those things are more important to me. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that my wife and I get to do those things on our terms in our time. So I've got about 4 years left to finish what I started in 2006, which is help my industry become better business people, make more money, retire more comfortably, and leave a valuable legacy of contributions, right? For your employees, your communities, and of course, your families. So announcement number 2 is we're going to make live events business fun again. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Look, battling pricing, job costs, price shoppers, supply chains, none of that is fun, right? Chasing revenue to make ends meet is not fun. Worrying about how to find money to cover cash flow is not fun. But making it all look easy is a blast. And I'm having more fun now than I've ever had in the 20 years I've been doing this. So here's what I'm going to do in my remaining time. And here's how we're going to make this a lot more fun for a lot more people as quickly as possible. There's only so much of me to go around, and I've had to be very choosy about who I work with and the type of work that I do, because I don't want to work 80 hours a week. So I'm going to teach only one business model going forward, and that's scalability. This means I'm only going to take on clients that share that goal and appreciate the benefits, which is great because what I've had to do for years is customize my advice for each and every client according to the business model that they have evolved into over the years and decades. And because everybody's business was unique, and I'm making air quotes with my fingers here, I had to develop roadmaps to make your business model more successful. Okay. And frankly, sometimes that was a pretty big ask because the model that we evolved into, some variation of project manager that might start at the beginning or at the end, convoluted sales and operations relationships and handoffs, everybody did it differently. Okay. So I'm still going to start with where you are now. I'm still going to assess my clients and say, hey, I understand where you're at. Now I understand what your goals are, but the roadmap we develop for you to reach your goals is going to be based on a franchisable, scalable solution, not figuring out ways to make your model work. We have a model that works, just like every other industry, just like the landscaping industry or the home repair remodeling business. These models have processes and procedures that work, and we do too, now that we can see them. So I'm going to roadmap you on a franchisable, scalable solution. And this simplifies what I teach. It allows peer-to-peer networking to be more effective because you guys will be using the same language. Everybody's going to be working towards the same model. And it's going to allow me to help more companies than I've ever been able to reach in the past. And to that end, I'm going to expand training, coaching, and consulting offers by recruiting industry veterans to deliver specific training expertise, moderate peer groups, deliver one-on-one coaching for your managers, salespeople, and other employees that will benefit from mentorship. And these coaches and consultants will follow the scalability playbook. My goal is to help more folks sooner. Not everyone can afford me personally. I don't have enough time to help everyone, but my methods are well documented now. And between blogs, webinars, and workshops, I can transfer my foundational systems to other trainers, other coaches, other consultants. And in the past, I've had to turn away sales training and short-term employee coaching in favor of holistic engagements where I affect the entire organization, which effectively means by expanding, we're going to be able to help a lot more people. So Stimson Group is going to have a lot more products and services to help you on your journey. We can help more people sooner. Not everything's going to be as expensive as it was before. We're going to have things that are easier to acquire and easier to consume for you to help you move your business on its way. Which leads to the next major move I'm doing, which is to bring back Jumpstart workshops. In 2016 through 2019, Jumpstart workshops were awesome. They got better and better every time. The audiences got bigger and bigger. The pandemic shut that all down. And while we've been figuring out this scalability, I've always had in the back of my mind, how do we do Jumpstart workshops? Because we were always focused on, sales and marketing, operations, strategy, finance, and things like that, traditional business things. But in the scalability model, it would look a little bit different. So the topic's going to be scalability, which means sales, planning, and procurement for those of you who have been paying attention. And those things will be featured in every event. Networking is going to become even more important because as we develop peer groups and groups that you can join, not just for owners, but for operations professionals, people who are technical designers can have a peer group. My goal is for the current and next generation of employees to fully grasp and embrace this model. And the rest of us old timers, we're going to share our wisdom and experience on how to manage all the moving parts based on the scalability model. And there's a number of other ideas in the works I think you will appreciate, like referrals to experts on software platforms, HR experts, talent recruiters, things like that. We're going to try and make as many things possible for you as we can. So yes, it does mean I'm going to be phasing myself out of some aspects of business over the next couple of years so I can apply more of me to all of the things that we're developing for a larger community. I'm going to continue to run a couple of peer groups myself. I'll do business assessment, strategy, and road mapping. I'll work with a few select companies that need to make major changes and want to do so quickly and smartly. But everyone else is going to have access to people under my system that will help them get that work done. And I'll never be that far away. You know me, I never turn down a phone call, right? So to summarize, I'm going to teach one business model, and that's scalability, right? I'm going to expand my team to support more companies and individuals. I'm going to bring back my successful Jumpstart workshops to help you learn the systems, apply that knowledge, and network with your peers. And remember, we want to make this fun, right? So if you have a few more minutes and want to hear more about scalability and hear what it's all about, just keep listening and I'll give you Scalability 101. So I've been sharing bits and pieces of this through my blog posts, but not everybody's had a chance to see it all together. And so let's just open up that a little bit and take a look at it. So what is scalability? Tom, what's the definition of scalability? Scalability is the business model in which overhead expenses are not designed to subsidize or replace direct costs. We outsource as many direct costs as we can, and the remaining inside direct costs are used on demand. So we're trying to not have direct expenses when we do not have any revenue, right? So in this model, as your revenue grows, your profit as a percentage of revenue is also going to grow, which is the textbook definition of scalability in business, right? Your revenue grows, percentage of revenue also grows. Now, some will call this a low overhead model, and it is, but scalability is not cheap and it's not about cutting corners. We want to make sure that every employee is operating at their highest level of contribution, their highest and best use, and each process is managed by an expert. Scalable teams are always focused on the future. Right? Future work, future planning, future jobs. Scalability is extremely efficient. Now, many business owners hear about the scalable model and recognize, hey, this is kind of what it was like when I first started my business out, and there was only a few of us. It was pretty darn scalable. And it's only when I started adding employees that I started having to chase revenue, because sometimes I had a pretty big payroll that I needed to cover. And well, if I need to make more money, I need to add more people so I could reduce my costs. But that means I have to add more revenue, right? And then more people. So in this, we often lose sight of what the core process of the business needs to be, right? And we want to share talented employees across multiple processes. Well, that just created huge bottlenecks, right? So if I've got an expert at doing shows, an expert at planning, and an expert at selling, and it's all in one person, I've just created a bottleneck because they cannot do all those things at the same time. And they're going to have to do whatever the squeakiest wheel is, which is going to be the job that is happening today. That's where that person's going to be. So we're creating bottlenecks in communication, planning, and knowledge sharing by adding people and not making it clear about what process is that they're going to contribute to. So one of the biggest benefits of scalability is to make sure that the business has all the tools and talent that it needs to sell, plan, and procure everything to do an event, right? Those resources are always focused on the future. The show may be next week, but we've got that in the can, right? Another show is going to be next month. We've got that in the can. We're working on getting future business for next quarter. Project execution, doing the show, delivering the deliverable, okay, happens in the now. Now, ideally, we outsource a lot of execution, but most live events companies will have some direct labor on their staff, just like they own some or maybe even most of their own equipment. I'm not saying eliminate all inside costs of goods sold. I'm saying let's reduce it and let's manage it differently. Okay? So scalability is a different process that requires a different organizational structure for what you've had in the past. So you've already heard me talk about sales, planning, and procurement as the three primary spheres of a business process. But of course, we also have accounting, admin, IT, and all the support systems that make a company work, right? There's still a place for the owner for mission, vision, and values. But the functions that we need to work on every single day, whether we're busy or not, are sales, planning, and procurement. So the three spheres replace the traditional sales, operations, project management silos that we're very familiar with. The goal is always to do a good show, but silos are constraints. Silos can make it difficult to communicate. It makes it difficult to expand. Silos just don't scale, right? We just can't scale silos. So a little bit more about these spheres, right? The sales sphere encompasses everything it takes to sell doable work, right? It fills the forecast with valuable projects by delivering properly quoted and confirmed orders. And this requires marketing, business development, account management, technical design, creative design if you do creative, estimating, and proposal development. And those skill sets have to exist inside the sales sphere, and they can't be shared anywhere else. No one in the sales sphere gets stolen to go do a show, because shows are in the now. Sales is always working on the future. And if we can't quote without technical design, then we have to have technical design talent on the sales team, not as a salesperson, but as a dedicated resource for the selling process. Now, planning sphere delivers a properly vetted and planned order to a field project manager, lead tech, show crew, whatever it might be. But first, planning has to source all the equipment, supplies, and services and talent that it takes to do the job. So we put our planning expertise into the planning sphere, and they develop orders for the work. We know what we're going to prep. We know what we need to subret, who we need to hire, what we need to book. And those orders are delivered to your procurement team. Now, procurement is separate from planning because procurement has to get a lot of work done, and they have to do it professionally. And one of the biggest challenges in procurement is recruiting, is finding more suppliers, more talent, more people to work with. So procurement manages your supply chain. It recruits new suppliers, and it makes sure that you are working from the latest costs, which is extremely important in the scalability model, because as we saw in the pandemic, our pricing models fell apart. And as we started doing work again and demand picked back up, we had to update our pricing, sometimes quite dramatically, because many of you hadn't done it for years. So planning and procurement are going to help us not only put together better shows, more complete orders, but keep our pricing in check, keep our supply chain, keep that bench deep so that we can do as much business as we want to. So these three spheres are naturally collaborative. They all overlap, unlike silos. So no one's job ends because everybody's working on the future, and the future never goes away, and there are no handoffs. Sales and planning work together to gain crystal clarity on the deliverables for the project. They make sure that profitability is intact, that we avoid scope creep, and we work towards the customer expectations that were set up in the selling process. So sales and planning focus on deliverables. Planning and procurement, work together to ensure consistent quality across all projects. It's not about managing costs. It's about managing quality. Because if you sacrifice quality to control costs, you're going to fail, right? You're not going to get the output that you want. You're not going to retain your customers. So every order receives the same detailed attention and documentation. Planning and procurement work together to make a complete show book that's prepared for the on-site lead or the project manager or the producer, whatever you title the person who takes a project out into the field. So that project manager or producer can become involved later in the process, because the skill set that they would normally have to bring maybe up in the sales process already exists in sales. The skill set they might bring to the planning process already exists in planning. They don't need to be involved in procurement, right? They can be a subject matter expert. They can certainly have conversations. Certain jobs may require them, to be available for meetings in advance. But most of what you do, we can push that project management process much later into the timeline. And then the relationship between procurement and sales is also very important. So they're in constant interaction to make sure that we have the latest costs on things, that we can get price quotes when we're trying to do something new, that we always have access to the best solutions, and we understand who we need in our supply chain, because procurement's looking at what sales is talking about 6 months from now and starting to pay attention to how that's going to affect our demands in supply chain, right? So that all sounds very intuitive when I talk about it, but it is quite different from how you're used to working, because some of your best people who are good at one or all of these things might end up off doing a show because, well, you're really busy. And when you're busy, we empty the office, everyone goes on shows, which means we've lost hold of the future. Now, there's an executive sphere that I talk about. That's the mission, vision, and values of the company, but it manages all the support and infrastructure it takes to run the business, right? We still have to get the show done. The content producer, the tour managed. All direct labor and expenses in the live live in the execution sphere. Okay, so there's execution, which is 100% focused on delivering a good job. So execution is really an island in and of itself, right? I did shows for a living. I was used to being handed a sticky note and saying, hey, here's the show that you're doing. Put the screen on this end. There's some stuff on the truck. Call the shop if you need anything else. And you go out and do a show. Now, we can do better than that, right? But the fact of the matter is execution has always been separate from sales, planning, and procurement. Okay? It's never needed the executive sphere in order to make it work. We just need to hand all the right parts and pieces and talent to the execution sphere, and everything's going to be fine. And it sounds great, right? So what's the upside on all this? Well, scalability delivers on two big promises. One, it is much less stressful, right? Resources are not double and triple dipped. You don't need to overthink job cost or micromanage expenses. Your risk is much lower in a scalable model. When things get dicey, you turn down work. And it's okay to turn down work because you don't have a big old fat overhead that you're trying to cover every single month. Okay? Scalability is therefore 4 to 10 times more profitable. We're actually seeing cases where it could be even more profitable than that. So lower risk, less stress, more profitable. There's a lot to like here, isn't there? And we now have proof, right? We've been practicing this. We've pushed this out into clients. We know this works. I've got the P&Ls to prove it. I wouldn't be rolling this out in such a big way if I hadn't thought this through over and over and over again. And I've been applying elements of this to my clients for the past 3 years and the complete model since early 2022. We're ready for prime time now. I want you to know about this. I want you to see the big picture of what we're trying to do and start understanding how you can move your business model to a greater form of scalability. So if you want to learn more about scalability or have a deeper conversation with me on the topic, just visit trstimson.com/scalability. There's some information there. There's some collection of articles and content. There's a link to have a conversation with me about how it'll apply to you. Do get subscribed to my newsletter. I'll let you know when these events are coming up, what the next webinar is going to be about. There's a lot of information out there. Fasten your seatbelts. We've got a lot to do. I've only got 4 years to get it done, but it's going to be a blast. We're going to love it. This is a great time to be part of the live events community. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of my life. If you want to find out more about today's episode, go to trstimson.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes, related links, and tons of other valuable resources. If you haven't already subscribed to the Intentional Success Podcast, please do so, and I'd greatly appreciate if you would rate and review the show. Also, if you think you might be a good fit to work together or want more information about the Stimson Group, I'd love to hear from you. Visit trstimson.com for more information.